of interest meeting. My name is Scott Simpson. I am the government chair of the Acquisition COI, and we have just a great leadership team. We're joined by, I think, everybody today. So Gisa Sateri is with us from SAIC, Mike Scorney from GSA, Ben Margolin from Makwa, and Nicole Nunn from Novatech, and of course, all of you. So we're really happy to have you with us today, and we've got a really great guest with us today, Sonny Hashmi, which we will introduce in a second. Excuse me. So the acquisition, oh man. The Acquisition COI, I'm just so excited about Sonny being here. The Acquisition COI really does touch on a lot of different parts of what goes on in government and industry. We're kind of the beginning of the end of a lot of things. So we've got a lot going on. We're just kind of wrapping up our summer series here on the revolutionary FAR overhaul, as well as executive orders coming out about commercialization and everything else. So we're really glad that you're here, and we encourage you to bring a friend. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Gisa now to introduce our guest.
Do you want to talk about our other upcoming sessions, or we can talk about those at the end?
Sure, we'll pitch them now. We've got two really great upcoming events that you can see here on the screen. We've got one in just a couple weeks here, October 7th, about the initiative to save taxpayer dollars through consolidation. We're talking with Tom Marin. And then we're going to have another one, which is a joint session with our IT Management and Modernization COI to discuss IT acquisitions and modernization and how that intersects with the FAR overhaul and how the two are really going to complement each other. And hopefully Sonny kind of gives us a preview into how that's going to go. So please, I hope you'll join us for one of those sessions or both of those sessions in October. And now I'll turn it over to Gisa.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Gisa Sateri with SAIC, and I serve as the COI Industry Chair. We're offering this session in collaboration with the GSA Federal Insight Exchange team, which I'm proudly a member of as well. The FIE serves as a platform that brings industry and government executives together to focus on discussions related to priorities, challenges, and success stories on topics critical to that agency. We have 15 teams in the FIE program series, always looking for new volunteers. If you're interested in volunteering for any of the agency teams, please contact April Davis at adavis@actiac.org. So with that, we have a packed agenda, lots of questions for Sonny. So let me introduce our guest speaker, Sonny Hashmi. I can't imagine actually that many of you on this call don't already know Sonny. He's been in and out of industry and government for many, many years, but currently Sonny is the head of global public sector at Uncork, and prior to his current role, he served as the GSA Federal Acquisition Services Commissioner. Prior to that, he was the managing director of global government strategy at Box. And prior to Box, back at GSA, he was the CIO and CTO, where he led the GSA IT modernization strategy, adopting cloud computing, agile acquisition, and DevSecOps principles, where he helped to create a cloud computing and performance measurement roadmap for the federal government. So with that, let's get started with our questions around the FAR overhaul and the future of federal acquisition. I think many of you on this call, I've seen some of the names before, where you've been through the calls where we're kind of talking through how things are going to change in federal acquisition. They have changed and they're going to change with the FAR overhaul. With that, Sonny, for the first question we have for you is, during your time as the FAS Commissioner, what were some of the significant challenges you identified in the existing FAR framework, and how did they impact federal acquisition processes? So with that, but I should say, thank you again, Sonny, for being here today.
Of course, Gisa, thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here. Always a pleasure, of course, and very, very kind of you to make such a glowing introduction. I appreciate it. Very excited about this conversation. Of course, there's a lot going on in the federal acquisition space. I'm also an active listener, and I've appreciated your prior guests who have had a lot that they've shared on the initiatives going on. So I'm obviously not going to speak on behalf of GSA, of course, right? I'm not privy to the day-to-day conversations that are going on around the power overhaul and some of the great work that's going on by folks within the organization, as well as folks who are helping the administration with some of those changes. But generally speaking, like, listen, it's an open secret that there's a significant amount of burden and friction that's been built into the FAR over time. And in fact, I'm going to say it's not just the FAR. It's many other regulatory frameworks around the FAR that limit how acquisition professionals make the choices that they have to make. And there's things like case law based on prior things that have gone in front of different courts of law that have set certain case law in practice, or certain things cannot be done on anymore. But generally speaking, I think on the one hand, the FAR has always had a lot of flexibility within it. And the challenges, I believe, have less so to do with the specific language of the FAR and more to do with having a trained workforce that knows how to navigate the FAR for the particular use cases that are in front of them, as well as a lack of automation that has hindered, the agency's ability to move quickly and get the outcomes that they are seeking. But with that said, there's certainly a lot of improvements and streamlining that is warranted. So I'm very excited and appreciate the efforts that are going on that front. I think it's welcome to take a look at end-to-end of the FAR, seeing if there's a lot of duplication that's already being reduced. So all those efforts lead to 2 or 3 different improvements, right? In general, they make the contracting officers' lives better, because there's fewer instances of them having to kind of navigate, well, which particular kind of clause takes precedent and which one do we. There's a lot of like scar tissue that's built into the FAR over time that's led to a lot of either duplication or even contradictory kind of guidance. So I commend the work that GSA is doing in streamlining a lot of that, as well as the work that Jeff Kostas and his shop is doing to share complementary guidance, not just in the FAR, but practitioners' guidance on how people should implement those changes. So with that said, some of the challenges we and this is not unique to GSA, I think industry sees this every day. The kind of decentralized nature of the federal acquisition environment, every agency making slightly different decisions, multiple different IDIQs, multiple different BPAs, and navigating that landscape has always been challenging, right? So that's not a FAR problem. It's just how the implementation of the federal acquisition landscape over time has led to the environment where if you're a company looking to do business with the government, you have to navigate multiple different contract vehicles, multiple different, like slightly different kind of criteria for when and how you can engage. And even at a point where you're actually trying to sell a product or service to the government, you're almost spending equal amount of time navigating which contract vehicle is the right one and which ones does the agency have access to. So that has created an unnecessary level of, I think, confusion and friction that I think over time needs to be disintermediated and mediated. Secondly, there's a lot more to be done in the federal acquisition space on tying outcomes to delivery and outcomes to spending taxpayer dollars, right? So that's more of a post-contract and contract management problem rather than an acquisition problem itself. But in an acquisition space, like the initial acquisition, the procurement, and the post procurement kind of management go hand in hand. If you don't set up your procurement well, if you don't have the right costs, if you don't have the right performance objectives outlined, if you don't very clearly state how performance will be measured, then managing that work and overseeing that work later on will become very, very challenging. I mean, Mike knows this since during his days at GSA and the work that he did. One of the benefits of working with GSA historically has been it's especially when you talk to some of the parts of GSA that are doing this on behalf of other agencies, that one of the benefits GSA provides, because GSA does it over and over again at length and at volume, that they know how to not only set the contracts up for success long term, but also know how to manage them on an ongoing basis really cleanly and really effectively, and that leads to better outcomes. And so to the extent that FAR can start, the FAR overhaul can start to professionalize and make those some of those concepts routinized. I think that will be really beneficial. Thirdly, I will say is that one of the challenges we always saw with the FAR is that over time, the FAR itself and some of the regulatory frameworks around it have become sort of the dumping ground of policy proposals come from multiple different parts of the administration. So if you want to push environmental benefits and outcomes, if you want to push outcomes for small businesses and communities across the country, if you want to push for a national security and cybersecurity capabilities, if you want to push for competition clauses that favor certain nations versus others, all those things ultimately find their home in the FAR or the other related acquisition regulatory lanes, right? And so it makes it very difficult for a contracting officer to navigate who the right provider is, what the market looks like, and what the fair price is to pay for a product or service. We need to be thoughtful about, and hopefully this process of the FAR overhaul is going to lead to a careful review of what requirements and policy policy requirements have been implemented because of multiple administrations over time trying to further an agenda that probably in isolation was the right thing to do. But when you add all those layers on top of each other, now who the right kind of solution is, or who the right solution providers is, becomes very difficult. Because, imagine a scenario in which one provider is more environmentally, proficient, but has a higher price versus another provider that may not meet certain environmental goals or national security goals or certain CMMI goals, but has a lower cost. What wins? Do you optimize for cost? Do you optimize for a non-cost outcome that may be beneficial to the country, right? And so as you layer all these things over time, administration after administration, and you only add and never subtract, that makes it extremely complex navigation for average contracting officer. So in the absence of, or like to avoid the risk of making a mistake, they tend to then do what they know best, which is go back to the same vehicles, go back to the same providers, go back to the same contract vehicles. And that stifles innovation, that stifles new ideas and new entrants into the marketplace. So it leads to the wrong outcome in the long run, and American taxpayers pay more and therefore get less innovation. So to me, disintermediating some of those kind of policy agenda items from the pure kind of acquisition specific guidelines and regulations is a good goal. It doesn't mean that those policy objectives aren't good. They may stand on their own, 2 feet, and they could be incorporated within the task order, within the requirements of a program at the program level. To identify the right kind of approach for a particular implementation, but by integrating them into the policy framework, it makes everybody's life a lot harder. So I think those are the kind of things I would like this initiative to start to kind of unravel.
Thank you, Sonny, for that. Maybe I'll skip through this one question and go on to, with the Executive Order 14271 on ensuring commercial cost-effective solution in federal contracts, what's your assessment of how well the federal government utilizes commercial solutions?
So it's a great question. I think depending on who you ask and in the context of separate agencies, it's either been done really well or hasn't been done really well at all, right? And to me, this is less of a, I think the executive order is important because it sets the tone for the entirety of government, right? It's not just a procurement problem. It's a program management problem. It's a solution architecture problem. This problem starts well before procurement is even in the room, right? When you decide to solve a problem, whether it's a business problem, or it's a technical problem, technology problem, you want to implement a system or modernize a capability, or it's not a technology problem at all. You want to, support the warfighter. You want to, maintain, command and control, whatever you want to do in government. If you start that entire investigation of what the solution looks like from a lens of we are unique, therefore our requirements are very special, therefore we need all of these T's and C's and special kind of provisions and exception handling that only we care about, And we don't really care who else has solved this problem before. We don't care how they've done it before. We don't care to learn from best practices from the private sector. How do banks do it? How do hospitals do it? How do manufacturing and organizations do it? We're going to invent a solution for ourselves that makes only sense for ourselves. And therefore, once we have done sufficient work on that problem, we're then going to go to market and ask for this very, very special solution that we have designed. You're only going to lead to custom solutions that are going to be very expensive, hard to maintain, and therefore you're going to start seeing either cost plus contracting types or contracting types that are, because the private sector is taking on a whole lot of risk to build this thing that's never been built before because you asked for it, right? So it's like me saying, I want to build a house, but I want to fine tune every detail of that house all the way down to the drywall level. And then I'm going to go to a general contractor and say, build me exactly this. They can do it, but it's going to cost me a heck of a lot more because every single piece of that house, every faucet, every tile is going to be custom built for me, right? And that's going to take significant amount of time. It's going to take an insane risk and insane cost. And that's how the government does it over and over again, even for simple things, right? So that problem started not at the acquisition level, but at the program side, well before acquisition was even in the room. And so as a government, as across program management, across acquisition, across finance, across IT, we should, start thinking about these problem sets in a different way. First question should be, who's had similar problems that they've solved before? How did they do it? Let's learn from them, right? And can we mold the expectations that we have to align to how this is a well-solved problem before? Now, the government is unique. We have unique problems that we solve. There's no commercial marketplace for tax filing. There's no commercial marketplace for the work that CDT does. So there's going to be unique things that the government has to do. However, I believe that 80% of the government does, even if it's a unique implementation for the government, for a government problem. If you take one step back, you will see that there's very similar problems that have been solved in healthcare and banking and financial services and insurance and you name it, right? And so learning from them and actually, making a commitment to ourselves, to our constituents, that we're going to go as far as this previously solved problem will allow us to go before we start to customize and specialize for us. That should be the right commitment. So if you do that commitment, then you start seeing that commercial solutions become available in droves, right? Because we have to recognize that there are large organizations out there that do procurement, that do financial management, that do HR management, that do supply chain, that do case management. If we can adopt what they've already done, then the burden goes down, and the cost goes down, and the risk goes down. So I believe that this is an all of government problem. It's not just a procurement problem, but it certainly becomes exacerbated when you start kind of like when procurement is not in the room in the beginning, it starts becoming a very challenging problem to unravel at the end of that cycle, right? So engage with procurement people up front, make sure that you have a very open-ended idea around what you're trying to solve for, not be prescriptive about the solution. Instead, ask the industry through statements of objective and other mechanisms, even challenges, how you would solve this problem, broadly speaking, and then actually be open to looking to different solutions that the industry offers and aligning to the one that actually solves for it in a, maybe not in the way we want it, but in a way that's been done before that ultimately lowers the risk. So there's examples of this having been done before well, right? Like, so if you look at a lot of the early work that TTS did, login.gov is built on commercially available solutions. They didn't invent their own IDM solution. That they identified was within the market, integrated it in a way that was relevant to government agencies, and productionalized it. That's why it was able to be deployed very quickly and over time integrated with improvements, right? Cloud.gov, built on commercial products. It's a commercial technology that's being packaged and made available. So and the list goes on. DoD does a very good job of this in many cases, but whenever I see a system that is highly bespoke and built over time, and millions of lines of code, and it's tons of technical debt, it's like I ask myself, like, how does, like, okay, even at GSA when I was there, we were having conversations around, we have to build this catalog management system and it's going to be unique to that. How does Amazon do catalog management? They do catalog management. They probably do it at a scale bigger than GSA does. How does Walmart do catalog management? And so instead of asking those questions, building those relationships and seeing what we can share together, we end up almost always in this lane of, but we're unique, so we're going to build our own. And we need to kind of interrupt that thinking. And I think it will benefit the government in great ways.
Awesome. Thank you. You answered my second question as well around some good examples. So that was great. Thank you. With that, let me turn it over to Scott.
Yeah, and I think where I want to go is directly leading from that. You talked about, I really love your concept of like starting early with the whole team, right? And getting everyone on board. And also like how 80% of government buys are probably not unique. I don't know if it's that high or not, but let's say what that is. But there's another aspect that, what DoD buys, Commerce is buying and Homeland is
Yeah,
buying and
absolutely.
everyone else is buying. So what is going to be the impact of the one gov strategy on all of
Yeah.
those buys and on like the integrators down the line?
That's a great question. So like a couple things, right? So it's easy to kind of mix it all together, but there's a difference between buying a commercially available product like cloud service, hardware, software, right? Versus buying a solution, right? So when we talk about a solution, ultimately you're solving a business problem for Department of Commerce, for CDC, for an agency, for Department of Defense. And that solution is always going to require some integration, some customization, some configuration that makes it relevant to solve that particular business problem. That business problem is not going to be same across the agency. So the SBA problem of onboarding a small business for a loan process may look very similar to a USDA problem of onboarding a farm for a farm, insurance product or farm loan. They're very similar problems, but they're slightly different, right? And so one thing that's important is instead of building those two things uniquely, different individually between those two agencies, if 80% of that problem is the same, let's leverage the right commercial product for solving that 80% of the problem, but then also require that commercial product to be flexible enough to meet the specific 20%, last mile, right? So it's unfair to expect the agency to use the same exact COTS product that doesn't quite do the thing and then living with the rest by manual processing, et cetera. So the next expectation should be, can platforms, capabilities that are available commercially give me the 80% of the box today that other people have used it and have a low latency, high velocity and low cost way to implement that 20% through configuration rather than coding. If you can do that, then you can open up a lot of opportunity. Going back to the OneGov conversation, so a lot of the focus of the OneGov, as you noticed, is a lot of on commercially available high priority products, right? And I think it's a fantastic strategy, right? Primarily, I'll say this because I like, as much as, for example, at GSA, we've always said, hey, GSA exists because we allow the government to buy as a unified buyer. Outside of a few examples, we have not really taken advantage of that position of centralization very effectively over the last 20 years. I think OneGov starts to exploit that in a way that's never been exploited before, right? And a great place to start is around software and commercial services, because ultimately it's the same product you're buying. An agency's negotiation with, I'm going to pick a product like DocuSign, should not be different than a different agency's negotiation with DocuSign. It's the same product. They both use cases primarily the same. So negotiating and frankly, if you look at the GSA schedules, essentially they do this and not at the same level. Historically, they've done that, right? You negotiate the terms and conditions once, you have a EULA that you negotiated once, you redline once, you have a standardized pricing, right? Now, of course, it can be negotiated down further than that, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, this GSA schedule is that first iteration of OneGov strategy, right? So the OneGov strategy now is taking it to the next level, which is how do we negotiate on behalf of the government as a singular buying entity and a body. And so it takes a lot of courage to do that. I commend the administration for really leaning into it. I think the idea is sound. The strategy is, it should work well. We're seeing some incredible offers for discounting, for example, from these products, because when you negotiate as a body government, you can certainly bring a lot more demand to the table and therefore a lot more kind of discounting negotiation power. the proof is going to be over the next couple of years what happens, right? What is the adoption for these contract vehicles that have been established, right? How many agencies are going to lean into it and make the switch from their own contract BPA or IDIQ that they signed with this company to these contract vehicles? Because as adoption grows, GSA's leverage grows to
And I think some
continue
of
to
that
kind
is
of that
gonna be,
lean into it.
some
Yeah.
of that is gonna, I think, depend on like pressure from the top. If
Sure.
there's pressure from the top for people to do that, then more and more agencies are going to do it. But
Yeah.
I think there's always going to be this preference for agencies to say, oh, well, we're special, so we want an
Absolutely.
exemption from buying it that way.
So we're talking about human behavior now, right? Like
Yeah.
this is not policy. This is not the FAR. This is human behavior. I'm special. I'm a snowflake. I want my own little
You are
thing,
special,
right? And
Sonny. You are
yeah, I'm
special.
special. Everybody's special. But ultimately, if you're buying a commercial product, like, I mean, but I don't go to Walmart and say, I'm special. I want my own agreement to buy this chair. Like, I mean, I say that their marketplaces negotiated pricing for me. And either I like the pricing or not, but I'm not going to say, I saw the chair at Walmart, so I'm going to call the manufacturer and negotiate a better
Yeah,
pricing
yeah.
for myself. It's just going to be too much effort for me. I can't do that. I don't have time for that. Agencies should start thinking about that too. We have this statement at Uncork. We like to tell our customers that Uncork allows our customers to be a customer. Like, so if you're a bank, Uncork allows you to be a bank again. Instead of being a technology shop, instead of being a software development shop, instead of being a data center operator, you're a bank again, you're an insurance company again, you're, State Department again,
Yeah.
because a lot of that headache should be taken up by GSA centrally on behalf of all the government, right? We negotiate the thing, we negotiate the pricing, we track what's being bought. You want to talk about security, compliance, you want to talk about T's and C's, red lines, you talk to GSA. And so that role for GSA is exactly the right one. But as you know, GSA is not a mandatory source of supply. Agencies can bypass it. And to your point, as long as that pressure from the top remains, I think there's going to be good adoption and movement in that front, which I think is the right direction for the government. But if that doesn't remain, then agencies will find ways to kind of find their own
Well, some of that is
special.
changing now. If you look at FAR 8, you've got your required sources that talk about
Yeah.
Unicor and Federal Prison Industries and Ability One, and that fourth one in 8.104 talks about required sources.
Yeah.
And there's still like a TBD for what those required sources are going to be and whether that includes GSA schedules or BICs or whatever. So, we'll see where the weight swings on that.
And
But
to
with that,
me, I will say one thing is like, yes, that is interesting, encouraging. It'll be interesting to see, like ultimately the proofs is in the data, right? So if the data shows that that is leading to better pricing, better delivery, then that should stand on its own. The one thing to also note is that that's been done before, right? GSA used to be the sole source of supply back. If you go back to the 80s, right? Like GSA was the only way to buy a pencil and a notebook in the government, right? And so, we can also swing that pendulum way too far. So what happens to innovation? What happens, like if you're not on line 2, does that mean you don't get to do business at all with the government? If that's the only source of supply for other than small technology services, that doesn't sound right. That means if I start a company tomorrow, I have no pathway into government, even if I'm better than everybody else, even if I'm more innovative than everybody else. How do we counter that? So sole sources of supply are great as long as they are open, continuously evolving, thriving marketplaces and not lockdown contracts that only open up on ramps every 5 to 10 years.
completely agree. Hey, Ben, I'll toss it over to you.
All right, thank you, sir. Great to have you, Sonny. So switching gears a little bit, thinking about sort of the future direction. When you think about what's going on now and all the change, what do you see over the next 5 years and areas that will continue to need improvement as we go once some of this initial effort has been sort of worked through, and where do we see it going down the line a little bit?
I mean, it's a great question. I think that like policies may come and go, priorities from the administration, whether it's a decentralized model or a centralized model, that may shift. But one thing that I think needs continuous focus and will remain critically important, and if not more so over a period of time, is data and automation. The problem with federal acquisition is that it's a data rich but poorly data implemented environment, right? The acquisition is a data problem. It's not an automation problem. It's not a workflow problem. It's not, all those things are secondary to, people talk about implementing AI to improve acquisition and it's more like reduce burden. Absolutely. All those opportunities exist. Incredibly, great opportunities exist. But if you don't have your data layer not only consistent, but implemented across the government, where every acquisition channel is generating the same information. It can be brought together for analysis, for negotiation, for risk. You are not and never going to be able to take advantage of the opportunity that exists to automate, right? And so it's not a systems problem. Let's not build a new system, a new portal. Screw all of that. You need to start with the data. You have to kind of agree on what the data taxonomy is for acquisition. It needs to be disseminated in all the acquisition channels in every agency. If it's centralized, great. It's an easier problem to solve. Only one agency has to implement the data problem. If it's decentralized, it's a tougher problem because everybody's got to agree on this, right? But either way, this is the data problem. And the amount of data that doesn't exist in an automated fashion in this is mind-blowing. So much of the acquisition process and how it's implemented today is not, it's like literally Word documents going over email. This is ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. We cannot do unstructured PDFs and data as an attachment and RFP goes out on a portal and somebody responds in a Word document and it's version 7. Stop all of this. Make it into a structured data problem. Make sure it's consistent, collect it together in one way that you can analyze pricing and competitive. And like we tried to collect, line item level pricing data, for the last 4 years, 3.5 years where I was at FAS. One of the biggest things we pushed for is line item level pricing data for everybody who buys anything against just GSA schedule, this one contract vehicle and all of the contract vehicles available, just GSA schedule, line item level pricing data. If you buy a pencil or your server or laptop, you know exactly what you bought, what the unit price was, and how much you paid, right? And if you had that data across your entire, $50-60 billion spend and schedule program, you can do so many smarter things. You know who your key providers are, what the prices are that are being paid. You can guide contracting officers and automate a lot of that work by saying, don't buy today, buy next month, because historically prices have been better. Like all of this work that Amazon does today and Walmart does today, we can do too, but we don't have the data. And so fixing that problem and continually putting the foot on the gas to solving for automation and data, structured data, making it into a big program and environment where data is being freely shared between agencies so people can take advantage of, and ultimately then using that environment to do more automation, AI, insights. The contracting officer should log into a place and it says, natural language, I want to buy this, and it should say, here's the 5 providers who've done it before, here's the average price somebody pays, here's the recommended, and here's 3 different RFPs that have already successfully been issued. You can copy and paste from them. All of that should be in one place. I'm advising a company called GovLee, which is doing some incredible things in this space because they have the data. They started as a data company. They collect data from hundreds, thousands actually, of sources of procurement in states and cities and federal government. And now they're working with the Army to really literally create a bot that can do the procurement for you, all of the pre-procurement processing, right? You can't do that if you don't start with the data. And the funny thing is that the government produces this data, but it doesn't have its own data that they can actually use in a longitudinal way. So a third-party company can collect it from multiple sources and do exactly what the government needs to do. We just need to get our data strategy together in government, and that's something that we need to continue to invest in. And then, of course, secondarily, automation, reduce the friction. The contracting workforce is going to be continuously understaffed. It's already understaffed. It's going to be continually understaffed. New people are not coming into the contracting core. It's getting more and more complicated to train a contracting officer because of all these regulations and so forth. And so automation is the only solution. But we can't really effectively automate if we can't get our data story together.
That's great. Thank you. Turning it around the other side, a lot of the people on the call are from the industry side. And so how do you see these changes sort of impacting folks on the industry side that are trying to sell into the government and things that you'd be looking out for?
It's tough, right? I mean, like it's not just hopefully some of these changes that are happening are going to make it easier to get into the government, to be competitive, to reduce the burden. But listen, the industry experience has been pretty bad for a long, long time, right? I'll be the first to admit it. We tried to do a lot of things when I was at GSA to improve it, a lot of automation, a lot of engagement, but we only scratched the surface of that, right? There's a lot of deeply kind of problematic things that need to be improved. And the problem, it starts with the decentralization problem, right? If I'm a provider of, tables, and I want to sell to the DoD and to GSA and to DHS, I have to get on multiple contract vehicles. I have to negotiate my pricing with multiple different buyers. I have to renegotiate my ELA multiple times. I see that every day. Like now in the private sector, I engage, we do a lot of work with different agencies. Every single time, it's like a unique, four-legged, like it's thing, like it's like, oh, like this agency doesn't like this, and that agency wants this new encryption thing, and it's like so that is a byproduct of decentralization, right? Every agency is going to have their own thing. To a certain extent, that's necessary. The DoD is going to have specialized requirements that Postal Service doesn't. That we get that, right? But to the extent that we can centralize and at least streamline so that every agency, every interaction is the same. We have a pre-negotiated EULA. We have a pre-negotiated pricing. Every agency accepts it. FedRAMP is trying to do the same thing. And of course, it's been a lot of challenges, but it's made a lot of improvements compared to having to negotiate a security package with every agency. Now you can at least have a significant baseline that you can be trusted for. So that's the model. How do we do FedRAMP like models for procurement, for acquisition, for software, for hardware, those kind of things? And that's what OneGov is trying to do. So I support all of that. If you're a services company, your job is even harder, right? Because it's now you're getting not just on different marketplaces, you're going to different BPAs and IDIQs and agency-specific BPAs, and like you're constantly doing if you have a business development team, 40% of their time is just chasing contract vehicles. You're not even selling stuff yet. You're not even going after an RFP. You're just getting on contract vehicles, no promise of return ever. And 40% of your time is, maybe 50% of your time is just chasing contract vehicles. That's ridiculous. That's crazy, right? And so we got to fix this. This is just a structurally bad model. And I think large companies win because they have the capacity and the bandwidth to keep investing in that status quo. Small companies just struggle. I mean, I've talked to so many, I advise certain companies, and especially the smaller ones, they're like, all of our energy this year could go after getting on one BPA maybe, and that's going to be a stretch, and that means that all of our capacity is going to be going on to this one thing, and that doesn't even promise us any revenue. That doesn't promise us any task order, right? So we'll just subcontract and beg for some market, some revenue share, and hopefully our prime treats as well. And that's not a good place. We're treating these companies, especially small ones, innovative ones, new entrants. It's so hard. It makes it even harder for them to take this market seriously. So I hope that across administrations, this could be a common goal for us to make it easier for these companies to get on board.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about lowering the barriers to entry, of course, with some of the things that are going on now, but in some ways it still remains very challenging, especially on that services side.
So the problem is that lower the barriers to entry, yes, it's a stated goal. We have the same stated goal. If you look at my performance metrics from 2021 and 22, 23, it was literally one of the three main metrics that I had, and we're doing a lot of work. It also requires more investment on the government side. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing, which I hope is something that's going to be changed with all more automation, more streamlining, is that when you cut the contracting core, when you reduce those numbers, when you reduce that headcount, the fewer people that are left behind have the same amount of work that needs to be done. And so the easy button becomes bundling, which leads to a natural reaction to allowing large companies to win these very large bundle contracts. And then you end up with CBOSses everywhere, and the small company is never going to win. And so if you really want to take it seriously, and you want to create opportunities for small companies to stand on their own legs, pull them up from their bootstraps, whatever analogy you want to, whatever phrase you want to use, if you want to give them a chance to succeed, then you got to make it possible for them to succeed, right? But everything becomes $1 billion procurement, nobody wins except for the very, very large companies. And so there's nothing against that, nothing wrong. I love the large companies. They have succeeded over time through challenges, respect, right? But we also know that that if our stated goal is to diversify the marketplace, include new entrants, that you got to make it easier for them to actually win and succeed in that work.
That's great. Thank you. And then lastly, for me at least, along the line of what you talked about with sort of fewer folks in acquisition, can we talk a little bit about stakeholder collaboration and sort of what are we seeing now in the market, and what can companies do to try to collaborate better with some of the stakeholders on the government side? I mean, I think probably most folks in this call would agree it's become more challenging over the last 9-10 months to engage with folks in government. And so how do you see that going forward, and what can companies do to try to push?
Yeah, I mean, some of that is natural with administration changes, right? New people are coming in, they're still trying to figure out exactly the new kind of direction for agencies. It's going to be difficult for them to take meetings and develop that relationship. I think over time, some of that will get easier. It's a great question. Some of that, so first of all, there's 2 or 3 aspects to that question that I'd like to address. There's a breakdown in communication and collaboration between the program office and the procurement office, right? That's always existed. And we need to continue to kind of fix that. Some of that is a technology breakdown, files changing back and forth, going over email, people are confused about. There's some simple structural things that often, make that collaboration harder. There's also a trust issue. I'm the program manager, you're the procurement person, you're telling me what to do. I don't think you understand how complex my job is. We got to get over this, right? Like President Reagan had this great quote, and I'm going to paraphrase and don't know exactly which is, there's no amount of good that can be done if you don't care about who gets the credit. We need to get back into that mind frame, right? It's not about the program office winning or the procurement office winning. It's just, hey, we got a mission to do. Here's the best path forward. We're partners in this, and right. So I've seen that happen well. And when that happens well, man, amazing things can happen, right? And we've seen some of those examples, like when COVID hit, all of a sudden, all of this kind of bullshit went away, and everybody's like, oh my God, we got a week to do this. How do we do it? And everybody kind of figured it out. When some of the operations in Europe were happening, everybody was like, we're all part of the same team. We got to get it done. We got to get 100,000 trucks there and generators, and let's just figure it out. And we got it done, right? So it can be done again. How do we routinize that? How do we make sure that is every time, every engagement? So internal in government, and this problem is going to get worse when GSA centralizes more procurements, because now it's not just a battle between program offices and the contracting offices. It's a battle between the agency that doesn't like GSA and them saying, "Oh, GSA screwed up my contract, so I can't do my procurement." We got to get off that, because that's a huge risk, right? As soon as something won't go right, as soon as there's going to be a delay, a program doesn't go well, it's going to be, well, that's GSA's fault. They did a bad contract. So if I had my own contract team, I could have done better. This is coming, right? We know this is coming because humans are humans. So how do we get ahead of that? How do we make sure that doesn't happen? It shouldn't require active forcing functions from leadership to prevent that from happening. How do we make sure that doesn't? So that requires metrics, clarity, transparency, accountability. How does GSA hold itself accountable? How does it serve customers? GSA is very good at this, but even more communication, even more engagement, right? So AAS has done it for a very long time. And how do we kind of take that ethos and break that out across everything GSA does? So that's one. The other is that that engagement between government and industry. And that unfortunately has taken a little bit of a pause. I think, like I said, it hopefully picks up again. Some of that is through events and face-to-face and everything. But I think what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that I'm seeing a lot more influence within program offices to say, we want to do this, and we'll just figure it out. And then procurement people are just sort of left with no choices. So they just get a request, do this, award this to this company, and just find the different. And that's a risk for many reasons, right? So we should avoid those kind of scenarios. But I would say advice to companies on this call who are building these relationships, they're pursuing this work, find the solution, have the conversation with the program side with a solution in hand. The amount of meetings that I used to take, and I still hear about, around company capabilities. Hey, we're a great company, we have some quals. That doesn't happen. That's not relevant anymore. It's still relevant. It's always going to be relevant. It's great that you're a great company. It's great that you have good quals, but you need to also go deeper now to understand the agency challenge and the problem they're trying to solve, and actually build as a solution, or at least have a point of view on the solution. Because just those generic meet and greet meetings around we're a small business with some data quals, like there's 7 small businesses that agency met this week with the same data quals. Why do you stand around? Like, what is differentiates here, right? So now it's time to go deeper around really understanding what that agency's challenges are, what problems they're trying to solve, and actually leaning into those solutions so that you actually have a point of view around their problems, not just a generic answer to we do good networking or we do good help desk. A lot of people can do that. So that's not easy work. I'm not saying that this is just a simple thing, but spend more time developing empathy around the agency's problem and build relationships with the program on how you would solve their problems. Everything else lines up when an agency is looking for a solution that aligns to your product or your service, right? And so that procurement is secondary. You can compete better than anybody else if your agency, if your target agency is looking to solve the problem the way that's aligned to your point of view. But having a differentiated, like having an opinion is very important right now. Don't be generic. Don't be like, hey, we can do anything you want us to do. Just tell us what you want us to do and we'll do it. That's every company. It's every single company can hire a developer, hire a DBA. What makes you special is your point of view, your opinion. So being opinionated by the problems you're trying to solve, and then defending that opinion, of course, evolving it over time, but like having a point of view around those that you can then take to the government and saying, hey, you're trying to solve this data problem, and we have a strong point of view on how you should solve it. Not everything will, like, nobody bats 100, but those agencies that do pay attention to you will seek you out then, as part of the procurement process. So that's my recommendation is don't be generic. Generic is forgettable. There's so many companies, they're all trying to, like, there's been a lot of cuts in the federal government over the last many months. A lot of contracts were canceled. Now, all of the people who got a cut are now your competition, because I'm unfortunately seeing a lot of companies throwing every spaghetti on every wall now. We'll just put a proposal in for everything, hope for the best. And that just creates noise for the government, that creates noise for the agency, for the industry. It's not a good place. So just to stand out from all that noise, be opinionated, and have a point of view around problems you're trying to help government solve.
All right. Now I'll pass it over to Nicole.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. So, Sonny, as we look at all the changes going on and start to relook at our approach to government contracting, I'm going to bring small businesses back up for a moment and talk about the impact we're seeing with these partners. What advice would you have to small businesses and startups to better navigate the new procurement landscape and effectively compete for government contracts moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. First of all, obviously, the small business goaling remains important, right? It's a lot of that is baked into the law. There's a commitment in all quarters of government to continue to make sure that small business opportunities, remain a priority for procurement teams. So I'm not saying that any of that is going to change, but it's unclear as we move forward. Imagine a scenario in which a problem needs to be solved, right? Path A is that we can do a set aside with small businesses and we can compete in that community and see if we can problem that. And like there's a solution there that can be built or offered or sold. And path B is, we can outsource this. That's also an option, right? We can outsource it to a company that does it for banks or insurance companies or wealth management firms. Path C is, we already have a contract with this other large company. We'll just modify it and add the scope, right? So these are all the options, and among many others, that leadership is thinking about when they want to solve this problem. It takes significant concerted effort to say, pause all those other options. We're going to give this, and we will allow small business to compete for it. Let's do a set aside, right? And so some agencies are going to continue to kind of push in that direction. Others will not. So if your primary value as a small business is your set aside credentials, you may find yourself frustrated at times because you may feel like certain work is not coming your way. You were hoping for more set aside. It's not happening. Hey, last year you guys did 33% small business set aside, and this year it's 5. What gives? All of a sudden, you're just waiting for the government to, do a benevolent act for you to be in the play. And I'm not programmed that way, right? I mean, like that's if you're a woman-owned small business, kudos to you. You have achieved a great amount of, you have achieved a great amount to be a woman founder, to scale a company, but that's probably one sufficient but not necessary but not sufficient qual now for you to win work, right? So then the next question becomes, that's great, you're a small business, you're a veteran-owned small business, woman-owned small business subzone. What's your point of view? What product are you building? What is your differentiation? You still have to build a differentiation. And so small businesses who want to compete, like the good news about this environment, by the way, is that small businesses can unseat large businesses. Your size is less relevant. In the age of AI, the size of your company almost doesn't matter anymore. A small business can activate 100,000 agents, AI agents, just as well as a large business can. It doesn't matter how many employees you have that's not a determinant around how effective can you be to deploy a solution, especially powered by AI. So AI is somewhat of a leveling of playing field in some ways, right? But if you're not innovative, if you're not deeply invested in that new capability, technologies, you're not building proofs of concept, if you're not actively, standing apart from your large business competitors, you're going to be in the noise. So I would say if you're a small business, find your point of view. Maybe it's data, maybe it's AI, maybe it's automation, maybe it's infrastructure, maybe it's software development, whatever it is. What is the most forward-leaning AI-enabled version of that? And you need to be the boutique player who can do it better than even the biggest companies, right? And AI is now your companion. So previously you needed 1,000 engineers to build out this product. Now you can do 1,000 agentic, like you can do Lovable and they can build 80% product for you. You don't even need to hire anybody. So you now have a tool in your pocket that can level the playing field in many ways, leverage it, like definitely lean into it. And so differentiation becomes, it's not just that I have a small business, but I'm also very, very capable because I'm specialized. So plan to be a boutique player, not just a small player, right? Small player is great. Government wants to help you grow. But if you're boutique, if you have a specialized point of view, because of your small size, you can move faster, you can take more risks, you can try new things that a large company may not be as nimble as you, then you can compete in new ways.
I appreciate that. Sounds like specialized point of views are the big thing. So I'm going to pass it over to Mike now to round us out. I know we are coming up to the last 10 minutes or so.
If any companies have a commercial solution to office space, because that could be really useful, because I'm getting kicked out of my room 1800F already. So
Office as a service, man. We got to do it. GSA can do it. GSA is all the office space.
I think WeWork already cracked that model at one point, if I'm not mistaken, and they went bankrupt because of it.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
So next question that I kind of have is focused on how companies can stay up to the date with the continuously evolving regulatory landscape, but I'm going to flip it and say, how can companies influence the regulatory environment? And with the change in the executive order and reinforcing preference for commercial solutions, how can companies identify a need in the government and build that commercial marketplace and bring products or services to market, similar to the way that Anduril and some of those other different startups have done that and influenced the market?
No, it's a fantastic question. Obviously, you know, silver bullet here, right? But so in the commercial, so the second part of your question first, one of the things that occurs to me, especially if you're a small company in the services space, if you're a system integrator, if your expertise, the special sauce you bring is deep understanding of the problem sets you're trying to solve, right? So even if you don't have your own products and no innovation, if you understand deeply the customer you work with, let's say you're a company that's only worked with CDC or Department of Labor, your job is to know more than department, like as much about the Department of Labor as the Department of Labor does, right? Your expertise and understanding and empathy of the government's problem is going to allow you to go to the commercial marketplace and work with the myriad of product companies that are coming into the market who will have maybe a great product or solution, but no idea what the Department of Labor needs. You can be the translator, right? And so you may have a company building travel system or travel software, or financial software for financial fraud, or like there's all these products in the market now, right? Hundreds of them, and increasingly new ones coming with AI. Your job is to be the translator. Like, here's how I can apply this product or these set of products together to solve this very unique problem the Department of Labor has, right? So that is value, and you should get paid to do that work, right? So you're almost building your own awareness of everything that's happening in commercial space, and then curating it in the right way, solutionizing it so that your customer can win at the end. So that requires you to have a very broad swath understanding of what's happening in the commercial marketplace, right? How many companies do you work with, right? I mean, are you taking a meeting with new product companies every single week? Are you understanding what unique value they're bringing to the table? Are you thinking about how to apply it to your customers? That's something you should be doing. So to answer your question, that's a play for small businesses, especially, who can innovate faster, I think, in some cases, even than the larger companies. The first part of the question is important. I think it's important to recognize that the government challenges are like, there are unique aspects of the government does, right? That's not going to go away. And that's not simple. It's not like these are deeply kind of complex problems that your Department of Energy or DHS or DOJ are solving for, and historically like have been solved kind of poorly. So there's still a lot of opportunity to not just so the one thing that I advise most companies, and like most of them are trained to solve in terms of systems. They have this system, it's run by this contract. We need to modernize the system, so we need a new contract. Break that thinking, right? The mission problem that needs to be solved, and let's reevaluate completely different ways to solve it. How can we partner with the private sector in new structures and new engagements and new ways that has never been done before? How can we deploy AI in that mix? So instead of thinking like systems, think like problems and value chains, and then you can start solving for them in new ways, right? So it's a moment for all of us to take stock of what we do, how we do it. What's gotten us to this point is not going to take us further. So, like it's time to kind of reevaluate the value we add to the customer, and the customer is going to be looking for different value in 5 years, 10 years time. How do we align to it?
Well, and it seems like there's a lot of role for private capital to play in helping companies be able to develop a solution to bring to market and solve that need, and then really, change the game for a lot of different agencies there.
I think so. So we've seen that happen in large kind of like whenever there's enough market kind of juice, you've seen that happen. You've seen that happen with Endural. Seen that happen with some of these kind of bespoke defense tech companies, because the private capital people know that there's a multi-billion-dollar market on the other side of it, right? If we invest into this, the DoD is this large, and here's the problem that they're trying to solve, right? And so it's easier to kind of find that capital when you know that there's a good enough market there.
Right.
But a private capital, but when the market is so decentralized that every agency makes their own choices, and like then it's like, well, there's not enough cohesive of enough need on the other side for us to invest in this solution. And so it's a really highly risky bet to make for somebody, right? And so that's another area where the OneGov strategy could play a role, is to bring that common need together in a way that at least represents a common market need, that a capital company can then say, well, DSA is saying that there's a $4 billion need for, I don't know, records management, and therefore let's go really solve for that in a much more modern 22nd century type way.
And I was going to ask you a little bit about how we could build off of the work that we did back in the day with IE and modernize some procurement systems to be able to give us the data to do that. but I'm getting
I
kicked
mean,
out.
it's a data problem, right? Like 100% goes back to the data problem. And I think there's a lot more opportunity on the table to modernize. And again, I think in some cases we still fell into the trap of thinking like systems, right? IE is a system and catalog management is a system, and how does this system talk to the other system? And it's easy to fall into that trap because that's the life that technology teams are living every day. That's the life that our end users are living every day. I log into this system and then I log into the other system. And it's like it requires so much kind of very deliberate effort to take a step back and say, well, what does IE do? Do we need a common criteria for a company to get qualification, to get work with, yeah.
I'm gonna turn it over to the rest of my
Yeah,
team
sure
to
thing.
ask
Sorry,
them
I'm taking up too much. I think we're at the end of the time. Yeah.
there. Yeah.
He's getting
Thanks,
kicked out of
Michael.
his room, so so he's just trying to run
I
off
totally
before they
respect
throw
that.
him out.
We've all been there before. Some angry faces looking at him from the door.
Exactly. I think he held them off at bay long enough. Thank you so much, Sonny, for taking the
course.
time and allowing us to pepper you with a ton of questions. We really appreciate your perspective. It's very helpful to us
I
and
appreciate
everyone
it.
on the call.
It's an
Thank you
exciting time
to
to
the
be in federal
audience.
procurement. It's a time of change. It's a lot of like trepidation. People are nervous, but it's also a time where I think new models will emerge. I think we'll start seeing some success from some of these initiatives. So I'm hopeful that as we look back at it 2, 3, 4 years from now, that some structural improvements have become obvious, and we can take advantage of that.
Agree. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you again on October 7th for our next session with the GSA FIE team. Talk to you all
Thank you so
soon.
much, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sonny.
Thanks,
Bye.
Sonny.
Thank you.